Recording in progress. Hello, everyone. Welcome to School of Speech, presented by SpeechTherapyPD. I'm your host, Carolyn Dolby, and I am so glad you're tuning in today. Today's episode is Collaborative Models for Comprehensive Literacy, bringing meaningful literacy opportunities to AAC users. And we are joined by my friend, McKinzee Steve, who is here. And she is a school-based speech language pathologist with experience, loads of it, managing the AAC program for a huge urban school district. Her professional interests include AAC, autism, multilingualism, and literacy. So everyone, I want you guys to start settling in for another great episode. I do want to remind you that each episode of School of Speech is offered for point 0.1 ASHA CEUs. And second, if your state license requires live CEUs and you are with us live today, well, first, thank you. I also want to make sure that you get credit. So be sure to complete all the course modules, including the one that says complete course, before the end of today on your Speech Therapy PD account. All right. Next, we love and encourage questions from all y'all. So please use the chat for your questions and comments for McKinzee. And as we get started, I know that I would like to know this, and McKinzee and I were talking, that we really want to know from those of you that are participating live today, what is your comfort level using AAC? So if you don't mind jumping in the chat, letting us know where you're at, and let us know if you feel like you are a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced AAC provider. All right, so while you guys start jumping in the chat, I'm going to make sure I have my chat up too. That would be smart. Here we go. Okay. I'm going to go over our disclosures. McKinzee receives a salary from her public school district, and she's also going to be receiving an honorarium from Speech Therapy PD for this presentation, and she has no non-financials to disclose. For me, I am also salaried for a public school, Portland Public, and I am also compensated for graduate courses that I teach for the University of Houston, and I receive compensation from Speech Therapy PD for hosting School of Speech, my fave of all times. Non-financial, I am a consultant for school districts across the nation, supporting their dysphagia program development and staff training. I'm also ASHA member, as well as part of their special interest groups 13, 14, and 16. And again, it's a wordy about me. I really cannot wait for today, all about AAC, not my forte. And I am so excited to introduce McKinzee Steve. Hi, McKinzee.
Hi, Carolyn. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right. I cannot wait to get this party started. Do you want to give us your background and tell us kind of how did you fall into AAC? Let's start there. What's your background in AAC?
Sure, absolutely. So, when I first started in our school district, and I was a CF, I was assigned to a secondary caseload, which was not my original plan, but I sort of fell in love with it. And the thing about secondary is you have a pretty high prevalence of kids who have pretty significant support needs in the area of AAC, language, literacy. So I kind of had to learn really, really quickly. I did take a course in AAC when I was in undergrad and in graduate school, but it was definitely nothing like, the real world um, of what it's actually like working with AAC users. So I think I fell into AAC mostly because I just loved the population that I was working with. And I became just like really dedicated to wanting to do a good job by them. As you are when you're a CF, you feel like you don't know anything. You want to do a good job. And that was the thing that I kept coming into time and time and time again. Um, so I learned it. And then a couple years into working, I was kind of voluntold to
Oh, yeah.
like take on the AAC SLP role. And I have not looked back since. Since I started, we have grown our number of AAC users. We have grown as a team. I have two wonderful, wonderful teammates that I depend on every single day. Hi, Danny. Hi, Kendra. And that's that's sort of my story about how I got here.
I love it. I just want to let you know we've got a lot of beginners. Hey, no shame in the game. I'm a total beginner as well. We do have some advanced too, but we do have quite a bit of beginners. So definitely may need some terminology on that. But I do want to just say, because we were talking before we got on, then we started that when you started. Can I give the numbers? I'm still like, oh my God. When you started, it was just you, one person, and you had roughly 200 AAC users. She's in a big district, y'all. But now, to date, over 800 or almost 800 AAC users. That just tells me you've got good systems in place. You're getting your kids' needs. That is incredible. With that, how in the world did you do it?
Yeah, well, I do have to give credit where credit is due
Mhm.
because, like I said when we were talking earlier, um, I fell into this job. I learned all about it, and I encountered something called capacity building. And I realized very quickly that I myself could not do each individual AAC consideration for each individual user because every single time I walked into a classroom, I was like, what about that kid? What about that kid? What about that kid?
Yeah.
And so it became very clear that my role had to be more of a training and coaching role. So what I do now is mostly partnering with SLPs, parents, teachers, and
Mhm.
support a bunch of different capacity building initiatives. So some of them are PD, just on like AAC Basics 101. We have a parent support program where we use graduate clinicians from a nearby university, and they work one-on-one
Wow.
with parents to kind of coach them into using AAC in the home environment. And then we have, I think what we're going to talk about today, which is my
Mhm.
personal favorite thing, a literacy initiative when we are partnering with in Texas, we call them life skills classrooms. So classrooms for folks with lower incidence disabilities, the more self-contained classrooms. So kids who are receiving like English language arts instruction within that environment, that's sort of where we call it AAC Book Club. It's like our little affectionate term for it.
I cannot wait to hear
Yeah,
about
so
this.
we just have all of these different programs. I do a lot of presentations with my team. We bring in guest speakers just to get our staff sort of all on the same playing field to have like a shared knowledge and skills base so that we can kind of have like an equitable community of like identifying and getting stuff to kids. So that's the long version of, of
I
how we
love that.
got
And
there.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
You said something and I want more information on this because I want to bring it to my district. But tell me again what you do for parents. You partnered with graduate students. Is that what you said? Tell me more
Yes.
real quick.
Yes. So we have graduate students in our district who are doing their practicums, their clinical externships. And so they are typically partnered with their primary supervisor or clinical
Mhm.
educator who is a typical school-based SLP. They have that school-based caseload. They're doing that externship, but then once per week, they come with us, and in the morning they support our AAC book club program, which is that in-person capacity building for teachers. And then in the afternoon, they have three back-to-back one-on-one caregiver education sessions where they go over like each week they teach the family a strategy, they show them how to do it, they coach them through an activity where the parents kind of role play, and then they review it, and then they do that for 6 weeks. So it's just a free service that we are very grateful to offer, thanks to our graduate school partners.
Oh my gosh. I love that. Thank you so much for going back and talking about that because I'm just like I was like, I'm always looking for ways to just what can we do in the public schools, full stop, on helping building, bolstering what we do in schools. How can we also help? Yeah, I love that build capacity. That's
Right.
wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Oh God, here we go. Okay, no, I'm okay. All right. So today let's get to our focus, which is literacy in the classroom for our AAC users. Should we start with how? What does it look like? Handhold me as if as I am brand new. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I am going to reference a few resources and books. There's absolutely no way we could possibly cover all things AAC language literacy in this amount of time.
Sure.
But there is a textbook called Comprehensive Literacy for All. I have no relationship with these folks. It's by Dr. Karen Erickson and David Copenhaver out of the University of North Carolina Center for Literacy and Disability Studies. And that book is not a curriculum, it's a framework that basically outlines this idea that all means all, and it means that every single child deserves access to literacy instruction, and that there's no disability that is too significant for a child to not receive access to that literacy instruction, because it is much less dangerous to give it to them if they, and they'll learn what they learn. And to keep giving it to them day after day after day for 21 years, than it is to say they can't do it and kind of leave them without these critical skills of reading and writing. And so that book sort of prompted this, because like you said, how was my very first question when I was back when I was a CF. I was like, okay, I'm an SLP. I started to get a grasp on like, how do I build language using this tool, right? And I always tell folks, like, think about the AAC device as a vehicle for language building. Think about the symbols as a visual representation of the words that are coming out of my mouth, because that system, whether the student is currently using, single words to make requests, or that student is stringing together words, or that student's using grammatical morphemes, like no matter what we're working on, the goal is language. The goal is for that child to be able to say what they want to say, when they want to say it, how they want to say it, right? If you've had any AAC training before, you've probably heard SNUG, spontaneous novel utterance generation. And SNUG, truly what I learned when I read Comprehensive Literacy for All and I started taking the courses offered by Erickson and Copenhaver, was that there is no SNUG without literacy. If you cannot spell the words that you want to say, you're always going to be dependent on the AAC company or your communication partner to give you the language that you want to use. So unless you can read and write, really you can't ever achieve that true spontaneous novel utterance generation. Not to say that you can't say a whole lot with an AAC device. There's a lot of stuff you can do with the pre-programmed words, but I think that really resonated with me. And then just like you, I was like, okay, but how do we do that? Yeah. And so within that framework, there are 4 questions that you have to ask when you're looking at an individual student. Do they know most of the letters most of the time? Do they understand that writing involves letters and words? Do they have a means of communication and interaction that they know how to use? And do they engage actively during shared reading? And a lot of folks think that means, do they answer questions? No, that means, do they chit chat about a text? Do they show interest in reading? And if the answer to any one of those questions is no, there's a whole body of research of interventions that we can provide to those students. For a lot of our emergent AAC users, a lot of those questions are no, right? They may have just gotten an AAC device. Maybe they I've never had the opportunity to learn the letters. And so we want to start with those emergent interventions for those kids so that we can give them the opportunity to sort of build those early literacy skills. So to foster an identity as someone who is able to read and write. And of course, I'm taking all of this from them. So all the theory stuff, I can't take credit for that. But I can talk about like how we take that theory and translate it into practice. And so really my role has been to develop a system to train folks on these interventions. So what we like to do, and stop me if I'm getting ahead of you here.
Yeah, no, go.
What we like to do is really take that approach and think about literacy in a comprehensive way. So we need to work on reading comprehension. We need to work on written expression and language, and we need to work on alphabet knowledge and phonological awareness. Just because we can't talk doesn't mean we can't learn what a rhyme is, or we
I love
can't
what you're
learn to
saying.
manipulate our phonemes. We can do all of that. And there are ways around it. You just really have to kind of dig in and trust the process, because what we know about disabilities is that we do got to give these kids the same types of opportunities. We just need to give them more.
Hmm.
They need more, and they need consistency, and they need someone on their team who believes that if we just keep showing up and trying and doing our best and monitoring progress in a way that we're seeing those small wins, that's how we get there in the long term. And it's hard for elementary school SLPs because we might not get there until we're in middle school or high school. But if you do it a lot, and we've seen it time and time again, our elementary school students are like getting these literacy skills, and it's really, really cool to see. So I've said a lot of words. I want to just check in and see like
Yeah.
where you want to take this from here, because we
Okay.
can go any number of directions.
Okay. So first of all, what you've said so far that has been so powerful is easy to say, but it's huge. When you said all means all.
Right. Those are not
And
my words. Those are Dr. Erickson's words for credit.
okay, but still,
Yes.
okay, that hit me hard.
Uh-huh.
And then when you said the concept that all children when you were talking about our children that don't have that voice, or in our life skills, we call them focus classrooms up here in Oregon now, that we can't predetermine or prognosis and say, oh, they're never, like a parent hears, oh, the doctor told us that my child will never learn to talk or walk, and they run into the classroom, right? I mean, you can't, don't say no, don't say never. I come from a place of yes, and oh, heck yeah. So I love that. And I hope, and I know as SLPs, we know that. That's why we got into this profession, is we know that there is everybody has capacity to learn. Everybody has, and we're here to help take that barrier down. So I think where I'd like to know is what's your first step in getting everyone to buy in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like I have been walk into a classroom and I'm all ready, and the AAC's not been, it's not been plugged in, it's not being used, or I'm having to bring it, you know? So what do you do to get it started? Because we have to have that foundation before we can ask them to do more, right?
Yeah, it's tough. And you cannot underestimate the power of a relationship between you and the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
That teacher, just like us as SLPs, did not go into teaching to get rich. They didn't.
Yeah.
They went into teaching, and they went into teaching these kids in particular because they want to help and they want to make a difference. And
Yeah.
so entering with that shared foundational understanding, I always say teachers are not the problem, they're the solution. They are the solution to this
Mm-hmm.
problem. And I think entering with that shared understanding and really taking the time, whenever we start our book club program, we have a walkthrough form that we do where we identify what the teacher's doing really, really, really well, because they're all doing something well, right? Even that teacher who doesn't know where to start and is playing movies for part of the day,
Yeah.
they may have a really good rapport with the kids, right? They may really have like a good like back and forth with them. They may have a really caring heart. And like acknowledging that and building on that strength is just as important when you're working with colleagues as it is when you're working with students, because as someone who's in a training role, there's lots of SLPs out there who feel like they're in the very beginning, and my job is not to come in and make them feel like they're not doing enough or they're not
Oh
doing
yeah,
it
because we
right.
will shut down, and so will
Yeah,
teachers.
and
I
so will
mean,
teachers.
yeah.
Exactly. So my job is really to kind of help empower them to see themselves as someone who can do this. It's hard, but it's worth it. It's,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, I love the word book club, AAC book club. What is this? Tell me
yes.
what is this that you are speaking of?
So this is sort of our take on push in sort of collaborative service delivery for AAC users. Um, we tend to, so you can do it. We've done it in a few different ways. The way that we're kind of on, that's kind of worked and has been the most sustainable is using a station teaching model. So what we typically do is we have 3 stations and we try to touch on all those parts of literacy. So we look at, we have their color coded. We do red station is reading and all the visual schedules and everything is red. And they have little folders with their pictures and their schedules that they go to their little station. They go to red station and they work on reading. If they're at that emergent literacy level, we try to group the kids based on where they're at, based on those 4 questions that I mentioned at the top of the hour. We group the kids into, similar interests, personalities, literacy level. We try to keep them sort of in a group that's really cohesive. I mean, SLPs know all about grouping. So we put them into that group and we have one teacher. And when I say teacher, it might be the SLP. It just means someone who is facilitating that group. It might be the teacher. It might be a teaching assistant or a paraprofessional. And some schools, we even have OTs in on it with us, and that's super fun. So at our red station, we're working on reading. And our emergent readers, they're getting an intervention called shared reading, where you really have a list of vocabulary words that you're going to make sure you model every single time you say them. But other than that, the focus is on the interaction. The focus is on building a relationship between you and me and sharing that joint attention with that book. And I'm going to model those words that I'm talking about, and I'm going to give them lots of repetitions, right? With no expectation that they're going to do anything except for enjoy that interaction. And over time, what I hope to see is kids engaging and going back and forth. So the intervention in a nutshell is you follow the car, right? You make a comment and you use a vocabulary word that you're targeting and you want to teach, and you model it on the device and you say it with your mouth, right? So you read the page, you make a comment, and then you wait. Give them some wait time. Then you invite them to participate. You ask them for participation. So if they don't say anything or they don't acknowledge, you might ask an open-ended question like, tell me what you see here. What do you think about that? Something that's inviting, but not putting a ton of demands on them. What we're not doing is like, point to the dog, point to the house. We're not doing that. We're inviting them to chat with us. And then what you're going to do is you're going to watch very closely. You're going to see what they tell you with their body language and their facial expressions. They might very well push that book away and tell you they're done. That's fine, right? They might look at that dog. You might say, oh, I see you looking at that dog. You say you like the dog. I see that dog. He looks funny, right? Well, I'm touching those target words. So whatever they do, you're responding to it. So you comment, ask for participation, and then you respond. And that's sort of what we do for our emergent readers. And the primary goal is to get them using language to talk about a book, right? And to get them interested in reading. That's it. That's it. There's no multiple choice questions. We want to make it as fun and engaging as possible and student-led, right? We want to use the books they're interested in that capitalize on their interest so that they can begin to see the value of reading. And then for our students who maybe are at a more conventional level, we'll use something that teachers are really good at this stuff. They're really good at, once the kids have those earlier skills, teachers know what they're doing. So we'll typically do like an anchor activity where we're like, today we're going to read. So for the purpose of sequencing, for example, read the story, apply it, do a sequencing activity. So that's sort of the 2 activities that we do at that red station. We like to have a theme, right? So I think recently we did like Giraffes Can't Dance, that book with the giraffes and that. Anyway, so we have a little theme, and then they go to the blue station, right, which is our writing station. And at that station, we have, again, sort of 2 options. There's 3 options for that one, but for those emergent writers, they might do an intervention called predictable chart writing. And I'm blowing through this really fast. I could spend a full hour talking about what each of these little things looks like. But I'm hoping that since we do have some beginners in here, y'all can just hear like these words, think, you know what, that one sounded interesting. I'm going to Google that one thing and I'm going to learn how to do that.
I'm going to be honest. I've been trying to write some things down because you've been using some really good. So one of them was car.
Yes.
I haven't heard that used in the way. I mean, so I love that. So car, meaning comment, A, ask for participation, and R, respond. And I loved that. That's short, sweet, simple. But I did have a question. So if you don't mind,
no,
like if we're going back, so, so let's say we're in emergent, and we have an AAC user in our group, because they're not all AAC users in
No.
this group. You've got multiple,
Yes.
we've got some that are verbal, some that are using AAC. So let's go with the first example where you're reading the story and it's the dog, and you're saying, oh, dog, it looks like you like the dog. The dog looks funny. What are you doing then? You are doing the target words on your AAC or their, tell me what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's very, very student specific. So
Okay.
when we do a book club, we often will bring big posters, but sometimes, especially when we're doing it, now we're not going to be reading Giraffes Can't Dance at a high school, but
Right. Yeah.
if we're doing it at a high school, you've had kids coming from schools all across the district. You might have 4 different systems in your one group. That makes having a poster very, very challenging because now you have a different symbol set than the one that's right in front of them.
Right.
So if the student is consenting to it, I like to touch it on their device. And again, that's me reading their body language and their nonverbal cues, you know, like if they're really upset by me touching it on their device, we're very privileged in our district. All of our SLPs have their own device with their own, with all of the apps that we have in the district on them, so they can sort of model there. But our teachers don't have that. So if in that case, we would do like a core board or like a paper version that they could point to that matches. And on that sheet with the kids' visual schedule, they have a folder with their schedule. Like I go to red, then blue, then yellow. And on the back of that, they have their core board. So they take that with them. So they always have that. So there's 2 choices there.
All right. So thank you for explaining that. So just for those listening in the back, you could have the core board that we all start with. And I am familiar with those, but I am not familiar with everybody, all the different devices, obviously.
Right.
And did you just say that your SLPs have on their, how do they have access to the different devices?
So they all have the 4 most commonly used AAC apps on their SLP iPad, which is super, super nice and very convenient for us, but it's not, I know that that's not feasible in a lot of school districts, but someone before my time did a grant and we have had those.
Hey, I say what I love about this platform and this podcast is that I want to give every option out there. And that somebody listening might be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to write a grant for that to get all the 4 most used devices in the hands of every SLP. You would think that, so yes, thank you. Yeah, it might not happen, but there might be somebody out there that just went, yep, that's what I'm doing. Hey, this is a great question that just came in. How much time do you spend planning with the teacher weekly? Right, because we are wanting to get the buy-in. So maybe we go, that might be our next. And then we might go back because I'm probably going to ask you more about the next step.
Yeah.
But the writing,
Yeah, planning with a teacher. So I'll be completely honest, my job is to help the campus set it up. I really want to focus on the SLP on that campus and the teacher on that campus. They are doing it, and my graduate student also. So we kind of scaffold them, right? So the first week we'll do our walkthrough forum. I'll talk to the teacher. I'll be like, hey, these are the things I noticed you're doing awesome job at. This is so good. These are the things where like we could learn to incorporate a few more things. And I think it's DTA schools, they have a free classroom walkthrough form that I really like. We use a modified version of that. You can go to their website and find it. Again, no relationship with any of the vendors I'm talking about, but they basically, I'll be like, okay, so you already have all your kids always have their AAC devices out if you're lucky, right? That's great. Right. We got that. But you know, there's no visual schedule, right? Usually it's the opposite. But like, what if we wanted to add a visual schedule? So we look through this, and the form has like individual communication supports, classroom communication supports, participation supports, and then it has like strategies, like, oh, do they have access? Are they modeling? Are they using like a balanced, robust vocabulary? Like all of these things are on there. So then we take that walkthrough form and we sit with the teacher and we say, what's your priority? right? Because there's no way we can do it all at once. And
Right.
so we learn from the teacher what they want to learn, and we try to focus on their strengths, and we try to focus on what they're doing. And then I would have to say, to answer the question of like, how much time are we spending planning? It varies from school to school to school. At first, we just do the first lesson plan as a model, right? Because my team is not usually there. So we, as part of our program, when we're setting it up, my team will go and like I will lead the station with the teacher. And so the first week I will model it for them. The next week I'm going to give them more agency and then more agency, and then they start doing the lesson planning. So it's sort of a 6-week gradual skill building thing rather than, hey, here's this program, you do it,
Wow.
because
Okay.
yeah, we know that we've tried to do that in the past. That doesn't work. You have to really
So,
show them what they're doing.
so basically you're training the SLP, the teacher, the classroom staff on this program, doing AAC book club.
Yes, and we are
Okay.
using books that are high interest, if we're or and or curricular materials. So
Okay.
like the whole point is for them to take this, because I think the research says kids need 3 hours a day of literacy instruction. And the only way to get that is if you're offering reading and writing opportunities throughout the day across courses.
Right.
So
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, so which is good because we also know that knowledge building supports literacy development. So yay.
Right. Yay. We always love double dipping.
Yeah, but the idea is we do it sort of in that ELA or Spanish language arts, because in Texas, we got
Yes.
a lot of classes that speak Spanish. So we do it in those classrooms, and then with the hope that they'll take that strategy and like use that as a way to engage with other content. Of course, they have to do their assessments, and it can't always be no multiple choice questions. But
Right.
I'm hoping that when we're reading, our passage on Martin Luther King Jr., that we're like, oh, this would be a good time to model, I don't know, the word free, or like, just something that like they can pair with the content. And I should have thought of a better example off the top of my head, but it is 7:30.
It is what it is. But I love the fact that, right, you're modeling it. So you're handing it to the SLP and the teacher to go forward and collaborate with each other. And then once they get the idea of how to do it, then they could come up with their themes that go along with what the teacher's theme is. So it's like you're not having to recreate. Your collaboration with the teacher would be, all right, what's your theme for this month? And then that your book club will go along with that theme to keep it cohesive, is what I'm assuming.
Yes.
So, okay, you explained red group, which was reading, and then we were just getting into what the writing.
Yes.
Okay, let's get into that one.
We love writing. And this is where I actually just before this today was talking to an OT who's been such a rock star and has helped us. I have like a whole little note card of like all the things that she has added to our writing station, just showing that there's like so much out. We all live in context, right? Like these multidisciplinary teams. I'm learning from these teachers and from these OTs like every day, but that's beside the point. So at the writing station,
Wait, is it a secret, or are you going to tell us what she's adding?
I will tell you. I will tell you. I'm going to breadcrumb you a little bit, but
okay,
I will
all right. You're reeling me in. Yeah.
So she, nope, I'm going to tell you the outline first, then I'm going to tell you what she said. So basically at the Blue Station for our emergent writers, here we're working on that skill of understanding writing involves letters and words. So we're going to do an intervention, and this is a 5-step intervention called predictable chart rating. Best practice would be you do 1 step a day. Some groups are sort of on the cusp, so you can kind of do more than 1 step in a day. But basically, it's a multisensory group writing activity. So essentially, you have a sentence stem, and that sentence stem typically consists of core vocabulary words, so high frequency words. And then there's a blank at the end where each member of the group will contribute an idea to the class writing. So the idea is that it's predictable and that everyone is sharing it. And at the end of it, we have a book that we wrote together as a class. So there was one time when we were reading The Mitten, that little kid, that book, and we all know that book. And the chart that they did, the OT brought in like a basket of like winter clothes, right? And so they the title of the chart was cold out or whatever, and they would do I put on and then they would pick jacket, scarf, hat, and they would pick from the real bucket, and they would like contribute. And so they would like get to feel the real object, and then they would get the model of the stem I put on their device, and then they would get the model of like writing each individual letter and like kind of making those connections. And when you're doing predictable chart writing, and again, not my intervention. I just want to make sure that I'm
No. You're just
um,
you're sharing. Yeah.
yeah. When you're doing it, you can really see the light bulb moments, right? You can see these kids press the icon on their device, hear it, see the letters, the words in the message window, and then see that what's being written on the board is exactly the same as what's in their message window. And so that's sort of where they start building those connections to see that, oh, I can be a writer. So first we write the chart together. Then the next step would be we read that chart and we talk about it, right? Oh, look, Jordan and Carolyn, they wrote the same response, right? Oh, but she wrote something different, right? And so, or maybe, Johnny and Jimmy, they picked coat and, I don't know, coat, hat, gloves. Okay, coat and hat. Both of those words end in T. Look, they both end with a T, right? I was trying to think of words that start with the same letter, but so you just kind of talk about it. And so you take those same principles from the red station and shared reading and bring it in, and you're modeling and you're using those words. And the basic idea here is, yes, we're following the theme that the teacher has, but that SLP is probably picking out those vocabulary targets, right? That's our job. And whether we're saying it orally or touching it on the device, we're still picking out the vocabulary targets.
Yeah.
And then step 3, the next day we do it, we bring little sentence strips where they all have their sentence. And then this is where our OT friend, she likes to come in and help with this part. They take their little scissors and they cut the words apart. And the key is that they are looking for the spaces. So you're not supposed to draw a line. They look for the space and they cut, and they look for the space and they cut. And then you kind of scramble them up and they put the words back in order. So, and then they glue it and they make a little book, and we staple the book together, and that book goes on the shelf in the classroom. So they're writing for a purpose to contribute to that classroom library. So that is a very, very fast explanation of predictable chart writing. It is one of the coolest early writing interventions because the kids, they get into it. They love it, especially when you do things like bring in real objects or photos or write about something they care about. And you write for a purpose and you show someone, they love to show off what they did. And we typically pair the blue station with like an art project. So on that last day, they might glue it and like color a picture of whatever they do and like talk. So we're sort of doing all of these things in an integrated way. And then there's another intervention called independent writing, where the kids can use either just a pencil or just a keyboard. And it's sort of like free writing where they get time to just write whatever they want. And this is cool because a lot of kids are really afraid of failing, of doing it wrong. Yeah. So the first time I do independent writing with a student, I give it and I say, go ahead and write about so they'll pick a picture from their photo book or whatever. Right? They pick something that's personally relevant to them, and then they write about it. I'll say, go ahead, write about it. And you'll get these kids, they'll just look at you like, what do you want me to write? Because they're so used to adults telling them what to write. And so in that moment, I said, I don't care. You write whatever you want. You can scribble, you can draw, I don't care. You can press just random letters on your keyboard. The only rule is we're only using a keyboard or our pencil, or some kids have like an eye gaze flip, but whatever, alternative pencil. But we're only engaging with the letters. And so during that time, you just give them reinforcement feedback. Yes, you have anything more to write, keep going. And then once your timer goes off, you take it and you just look, oh, look, I see you wrote a bunch of exclamation points, right? Yeah. Maybe you're saying you're really happy, you're really excited about this. And so you attribute meaning to what they wrote. And the idea here is you want to see complexity over time. You want to start to see these things influencing each other. So you want to start seeing that predictable chart writing influencing the independent writing by seeing spaces appear in their letter strings. You know what I mean? Or by seeing, when we'll talk about the yellow station next, or by seeing like first letters that can be attributed to the picture. D for dog, C for cat, whatever. And so over time, in very small incremental steps, you want to start seeing them all kind of work together in a way where the yellow and the red station influence their written expression, basically.
I love this. I don't know if you know this. I started out as a kindergarten teacher. You are singing. I mean, I love everything you're saying, especially when you would make the students all had their own sentence, cut it apart, rearrange it. Yep. That exactly what I was doing. Then they are doing their illustration, then making that into a book that then they read later. I love that because then they get so excited to see their page in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the other thing that you just said is how did you say that you bring meaning to what when they're just doing that free write,
Mm-hmm.
that you are showing them that what they're writing has meaning to you too, that shared meaning of what written language is. Yeah. Okay. I don't want to stop you. Let's get to the yellow group next.
And yellow station is the scariest for SLPs, but the most comfortable for teachers.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So aside from phonological awareness, we're good at that. But at that yellow station, we're really doing a lot of like word work, right? So for our emergent learners, this is where we're looking at, does the student know most of the letters most of the time? Yes, they do. We'll talk about that later. But if they don't, we're really wanting to teach them the letters, right? So we might do an explicit alphabet knowledge instructional routine. We're spending time explicitly working on, this is the uppercase A, this is the lowercase a, and OT has taught me all the language that they use in their curriculum for how to teach that. Teach how to write the letters. And then, I'll say it with my mouth and you say it in your head or you say it on your device. Ready? A, check, check, check. Bonus if you can do like I do, we do, you do. So I'll say it, then we'll say it together and then you try. Some kids don't use speech. Some kids aren't going to produce it on their device yet, but it's still worth giving them that repeated exposure because one day they might. So A. Or let's do a consonant. Let's do B, B, B. B makes the B sound, right? I'll say it with my mouth. You can say it with me if you can talk. If not, that's okay. You say it in your head. Ready? B, B, B. Great. Let's write the letter B 3 times. Okay, now let's look at our book and let's find the letter B in our book, right? Let's find it in context. And that might be our quick routine. Then we typically pair that with like a sensory motor activity. So maybe we have a sensory bin with like different things that start with B and we're pulling them out and we're looking at them and we're using language to talk about them. I found whatever. Oh, look, there's the whatever. Or maybe we have, they do like the wet, dry, try. I don't know if anyone knows like the handwriting without tears, but they have these like chalkboards that the OTs love this. This is one of the things my colleague talked to me about today. So they have a chalkboard with like a little small piece of chalk, which this is an OT trick that I just learned about today, that because it's so short, kind of forces the tripod grasp so that, because if it's longer, they can just grab it. But if it's small, they have to like, so then they have the letter B, say, written on that chalkboard, and then they take a little wet sponge and they get it wet, they erase it. Then they take a little paper towel and they dry it and they make the B. And then they try it with the chalk. So it's wet, dry, try. And so they can like they can write that letter B and kind of get that practice. So there's lots of like different multi-sensory ways that we can work on alphabet knowledge. And then at that station, we're also working on phonological awareness. So we're working on that whole, can we identify syllables? Do we know about rhyming? What about alliteration? All the way into phonemic awareness. Like, can we manipulate sounds? Once we get into that, then we're more at that conventional level and we're ready for more explicit systematic phonics instruction. And so that is really teachers' bread and butter. Like that, they usually have a curriculum, and we'll just follow the curriculum. And the teacher loves the yellow station. I usually start them out there because they're like, I know how to do this. And the only difference is we're pairing it with that AAC system and those target vocabulary words. And so when we're doing those multisensory activities, we might be working on, I see, I like, this is fun, quick little social interactions and using language to talk about what we're doing. So that's that's a really broad overview of what we're doing. And like, we have a whole training before we start and we do, we sit with them for 6 weeks to get them there. But yeah, that's sort of the program in a nutshell.
That is fantastic. I could, so I love that. I love themes. I love the way that you keep the theme great with teachers if we're on the same page. We're using what I love is let's all work at the top of our license. Yeah, get that teacher in the center that is where she is doing her best work. Let us go in where we could be doing maybe that first group where we're really doing target vocabulary, doing the language part of it that really is sort of our where we rise to shine.
Yep.
Right? And I love it. Um, uh, wow. I don't even know where to go next. I just love this so much. You're hitting so many targets too, with the kids, not, I guess tell me more about including the AACUs, maybe, little tips and tricks on to get us thinking of like what
Yeah.
do we need to be thinking about to make sure that this is AAC friendly and right?
Yes. So including the AACUs, so I guess this kind of goes back to those questions that we keep going back to about buy-in. Teachers know the science of reading, right? And so if you
Mhm.
think about, if you outline the simple view of reading for them, right? Language comprehension times word identification decoding equals reading comprehension. If language comprehension is weak, it gets a score of 0. Even if word identification decoding is strong, 0 times 1 is 0. So we don't have reading comprehension. So in order to ever achieve reading comprehension, we need to have oral language. If we don't have oral language, which I say oral language because that's what they call it, right? Oral language doesn't necessarily mean spoken speech, right? It doesn't mean speech necessarily. It means language. I really wish they would just say language.
Yeah.
If we don't have language, we don't have reading comprehension. So that's where we kind of tell the teachers, like, you're going to be spinning your wheels if these kids who don't have speech because of their disability, right, either motoric or neurological, it doesn't matter. They don't have any opportunities to practice using language if they don't have speech unless you do AAC. They don't have the opportunity. And
Yeah.
so, you know, if you can think of it like if you go take a Spanish class, right? And you listen and you listen and you listen, but you're never, ever allowed to write it or say it, you're probably not going to retain it. You're probably not. Um, and that's where I think there's a lot of like aha moments, like, oh, they need, like, this is their language. And I think sometimes there's just a disconnect on what language truly is, right? And all the components that go into it, right? This AAC device is not just a vehicle for I want, I want, I want, I want, right? It's a vehicle for I think, I feel. It's a vehicle for analyzing Shakespeare. Like it is something that is beyond just those like basic communicative functions that people are like, well, that's a functional life skill. Yes, but they're not going to learn to read unless we really get in there and teach them vocabulary and teach them grammatical morphemes and teach them the skills that they need to really understand written language. You can't understand spoken language or written language. We need a way for them to get that language. And that's why I like to say, think of that AAC system as a visual representation of the language. So it's not just I want, I want, I want. It's last weekend I went to the park with grandma and we saw three dogs and my favorite was the big one and I found out it was a Great Dane and I asked the owner what his name was and his name, you know what I mean? Like that's language. Can you tell I like dogs?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Hey, girl. Yeah, same. So, right. And what I like is like, let's start at the beginning,
Mhm.
right? You've got us set up. What would it look like in an upper elementary, middle school, maybe in an older
Yeah.
student group?
Yeah. So we have material. So there's the curricular materials, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes they are not interesting enough to get that student
Engaged.
motivated to be a reader, right? Sometimes that, you know, article on the Statue of Liberty just is not going to do it. And that's okay. We still have to give it to them.
Right.
But in these ELA moments, when the speech therapist is coming in and our primary focus is working on building those earlier skills, right? Because in order to access the general ed curriculum ever, we have to have those early skills.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to find anything that's interesting to them. And this like content level mismatch of like upper, like high schoolers is tough.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible, especially now. We've actually been using AI
Oh,
to,
hey, yeah.
we'll write like, I'll say like, okay, so let's say the gen ed curriculum is reading Because of Winn-Dixie. Okay, I might say, write a chapter by chapter summary of Because of Winn-Dixie at a first grade reading level. And it does a decent job. You have to go in and edit it, but then now I have a text that is like an adapted version of that. There's also Tar Heel Reader, where lots of folks have contributed like adapted text for like whatever books
Oh,
that the gen
no.
ed curriculum
Use your
is using.
librarian.
Yes,
Um,
and so there's a lot of stuff out there. Um, but that finding something that's like a picture that is age respectful
mhm.
and like one or two sentences about the content that has a pretty simple story flow but is still age respectful and interesting. I also really like, sometimes I have those like Spider-Man books that like look like the movies, or like you can like go get like these like, they are written for littler kids but they like are like the Marvel characters or like
Mhm.
the characters that the kids like. So I have a couple of those that we'll use for upper elementary. And then graphic novels also I love to use with like upper elementary, middle school, high school. Like, um, you know, you can find some, you have to pre-read them though, because some of them are a little spicy.
Yeah. Always pre-read before you anything. Just like
Yes,
we have to be good stewards of everything. We have to
absolutely.
use the app before we share it. View that entire video clip before you play it.
Yes,
Read it to it through its entirety, right? So you
absolutely.
know what you're getting yourself into.
Yes. Um, but yeah, I think just finding materials is really challenging. But once you leveraging the student's interest and strengths is like the number one key. If a student is 15 years old and loves Elmo, I'm
Mhm.
going to expose them to other, you know, content, but I'm not going to say you can't like that because it's not appropriate. But I'm
Right.
probably not going to use Elmo for every single kid in that class, you know,
Yeah.
because it's not,
Appropriate for
yeah,
everybody,
exactly.
but you do want, right. And you want to make sure you're hitting everybody's, where everybody's at.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, I mean, I love keeping everything child led or student rather, because they're not, some of them are,
Yeah.
as we get into the older grades, they aren't little kids anymore. And we need to be, they
Right.
need to be the respect. And I love the way, um, just, I can feel how much respect you have for your students and age relevant, age respectful, when we're, and what I think I love is your expectation is that they can.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes what people need to just hear that. I like it when someone says, no, you can. And you're like, yeah, I can I?
Yeah,
Um,
you can. And you can. And SLPs who are listening to this, you can. You can do this.
you
You
can
can,
do this.
you already are doing this. It's really just a matter of taking the time to learn where the words are on, learn the tool and
Mhm.
learn how it's set up instead of going, that doesn't make any sense. Pause and think, why is that set up that way? All of the, I did see someone, I'm peeking on your, I'm
No.
taking your job. I saw someone ask
Oh,
about the
sorry,
four
did I
most
miss
common
something?
apps. No, I just saw someone that asked about what the four most common apps are. And I think this is worth mentioning because all of these vendors have a plethora of resources where you can learn this stuff. And a lot of them offer free CEs too. So yes, Proloquo to Go and TouchChat are two of them. The other two are Lampwords for Life and TD Snap.
Say that slower. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yes, Proloquo to Go. So
Mhm.
that's the one with like a little owl. You see that one a lot. Touch Chat with Word Power is another leading AAC system, and then LAMP Words for Life is
Mhm.
another one. Also, the PRC like Unity systems are very, very
Oh,
common, but those are not available on iOS. So we actually, our SLPs don't have access to those, but LAMP Words for Life is similar. Um, when we have a kid that has that, it's I go out and I train them and I show them how to download the free version on their PC so they can learn it on their PC
mhm.
because we can't give it to them. It's not available on iOS. And then the last one is TD Snap by Toby Dynavox.
I'm just trying to get those down.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, cool. Right. I think we all want to do better. We all want to do what we can. And I know that it's daunting. It is just daunting. And I think, I'm excited for me to think like, okay, how can I encourage Carolyn, use your words. Oh my gosh. What I'm trying to say is this, that yes, we have to front load. You're front loading, right? But once we have the teachers really understanding and really using it, not just like showing them, you're really doing it all together, that they are going to then continue to do this without us. Because if they're only using their device with you, it's not really their language.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
I think that was really powerful when you said if you were learning Spanish and you just were there to listen and you were never able to speak it, the same as if they're only using the device when they're with you, it's not actually their language at all.
Right. And I will say that the most common thing when at the end, I'll sit with the teacher and I'll say, what did you learn? What do you definitely want to keep doing? What feels a little bit unsustainable? How can I help you set you up for success? Like we have that follow-up conversation as well. The most common thing I hear is I had no idea they could all use their devices that well. That is the number one most common thing I hear.
Oh,
And I'm just like, yeah, and I had no idea that they were getting this much awesome exposure to letters. And now they have a way to put it out, right? You were putting it in this whole time. Now they have a way to put it out because we're doing it together.
okay. I had another question.
Okay.
So what is what is the fiscal note as in time? Like, because our time is money,
Mhm.
as that campus SLP.
Yes.
Like, how much are we having? Oh, that sounds negative. How much do we get to be part? Are we oh gosh, I can't believe I'm coming negative. It's not. I'm just saying, like, doing this AAC book club, you
Yes.
said doing it multiple times throughout the week. So, like,
Yes.
right? So, is the SLP in every single? Oh, thank you. I was so glad that's the answer. So the
Nope.
answer was no, people that's listening. Okay,
No.
explain that, because I was at one point going, I can't do this every day in the
No, you
classroom every day. I can't.
absolutely no, you absolutely cannot.
Okay.
Based on your caseload, unless your caseload is only that, in which case I want your job.
Right.
Um, but they do it for their service minutes that are in the IEPs, right? So
Okay.
if the kids, in the class, a lot of those kids have similar-ish service
Sure.
times.
Yep.
Some of them may also get a couple, like a pull-out session, in addition to whatever they're doing. So the SLPs in there maybe once or twice a week, doing it with the teacher, with the idea
Mhm.
that the teacher's doing the same lesson plan, right, on the other days. And then we'll switch the book and we'll come in again, maybe on Monday or every Wednesday, whatever day you're doing your
Mhm.
services in the classroom. We read Giraffes Can't Dance one week, and then we read, I don't know, Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, and then we read whatever. It doesn't matter. Also, these books, these lesson plans. Oh, PRC has
Mhm.
on their website these lesson plans. That's what inspired all of this. They have
What?
it's called a literacy planner, and they have like lesson plans for all of this. And like in our district, one of our SLPs on my team did a donor's choose and like got like all the supplemental materials for like the sensory motor activities to go along with it. So that was pretty cool because now we have like the book and we have like these kits of like, here's a book unit. And like if the teacher's talking about animals, we can do the animals. If the teacher's talking about food, we have a whole food one. Whatever the class is doing. Um, Yeah, but the SLP is not. They're in there for their service minutes. You do your
Okay.
minutes. They're in there for what they're legally obligated to be in there for. And
Mm-hmm.
then they also we strongly encourage SLPs to write indirect time so that they can have that planning and coaching sessions and follow-ups with the teacher into the IEPs of AAC users because the teacher's going to have questions, especially at the beginning, right?
Yes. Yes. And I'm so glad that you put that in there because I think I want to I would love for all of us to think about what indirect time is.
Yes.
And that is that time. Being able to explain to the parent why there is some indirect time. What's that for? That's for me to be working with the teacher to troubleshoot, to check in, make sure exactly what you're saying, what's working, what's not working, how can I help support it when I'm not here?
Right. Getting that lesson plan and saying, okay, here's 10 vocabulary words you can work on in this. And here's, for this kid, like, let's try working on 2 words that, in Spanish have subject number agreement or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
gender number agreement,
Right.
or whatever their IEP goals are, right? Like, here's how you model that on their device. And like just having that, this is my lesson plan, that's how you do that.
Mm-hmm.
So like SLPs, whether you're a beginner with AAC or not, you know how to support vocabulary, you know how to support um, syntax, you know how to do that. It's just a matter of, okay, taking the time to, how do I do that with this tool? And
Right.
then taking the indirect time for you to think through that and communicate it with the teacher in a way that's manageable for them. Because if you give a teacher a device, Lamp Words for Life with 5,000 words on it, and you say model on this, they're going to go, what? But if you say, hey, here's Lamp Words for Life, we're going to work on describing words. Let's work on big, small, hard, and soft this week. And then here's where they are, right? Now you try. Okay, so every time you say those words, model it. When you're doing your science lesson about rocks, talk about if they're big or small, hard or soft, whatever. So I take the curriculum and I look at it and I say, here's the vocabulary words. Here's where they are on the device. Here, teacher. Just touch them when you say them for now, right? We can get into more complex things later, but if we can have the devices out and those kids getting aided language models, that is a huge win. Huge.
Oh, I love this. You have given us so just aha moments for me on just getting started. And I love the thought. I love your concept of book club. Everyone loves book club. I love working in stations. I think that's great. I love the way that you had the red, what was it, red, yellow, and blue, or red, blue, yellow. However, fantastic. I wanted to, what did you said, PRC literacy,
PRC literacy planner, I believe, or
literacy planner?
literacy. I will Google it for you 1 second.
Okay. I'm just thinking
Yeah,
any
PRC
resources,
literacy planner.
PRC literacy planner.
Hmm.
Y'all, McKinzee says they have all the lesson plans there. No one has time to reinvent the wheel when we're already trying to figure out AAC, which is very daunting for me and maybe many of our listeners as well.
Yes.
This has been fantastic. McKinzee, thank you so much for being with us today. I can't believe that our time is up, and I want to be respectful of your time as well. I have been scribbling down so many things that you've said. It's just been amazing. Being aided language, all the things that you've been saying is just amazing. Oh, thank you for adding that into the chat. Thank you so much. I want to thank you, McKinzee, again for coming. You have been an amazing guest.
Thanks so much for
Just like,
having me.
oh, my pleasure. I mean, love it. And everybody else is like, we love you. You're amazing. So much good information. Now, okay, so as unfortunately we have to almost say goodbye, I do want to remind all of you out there, all y'all out there listening live, if your state license requires live CEUs, the moment we are done here, I want you to jump onto your Speech Therapy PD account and fill out all those course modules, including the one that says complete course because I want you to get your credit for today. All right. I want to thank everyone for joining in, and I really hope to see you at our next episode. Bye, guys. Thanks.